collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
With pilot studies into 5G already underway in Cyprus, we talk this week about the pros and the cons to the Minister of Communications.
We are ready, we are preparing to introduce it in our society and in our economy.
And the President of the Cyprus Committee on Children's Environment and Health.
We can have some protective zones around hospitals and schools. We don't need to have Wi-Fi internet in schools. France already prohibits Wi-Fi in schools up to the 15 years old.
Well, I'm sure you've heard that CETA, MTN and Primetel have been given licences to run pilot 5G programmes. Now, if you're on social media, you'll no doubt have seen the pros and the cons of rolling out 5G. In fact, recently, the House Labour Committee chairman here in Cyprus, Andreas Fagondis, said that there are 1,300 radio and mobile phone towers and TV masts around Cyprus. He also added that only half of those are licensed. Well, I've come to the Ministry of Transport and Communications today to talk to Vasiliki Anastasiadou about 5G and how it's going to impact Cyprus. Let's just say before we start that if we refer to the ICNIRP, that stands for the International Commission on Non-Ionising Radiation Protection. So I think I've laid the groundwork there, Vasiliki. Tell us why we seem to be in such a rush. I think that's what concerns people, because there is science out there that suggests that 5G is going to impact our health even more than 2, 3 and 4G have, and we know that to some degree they do. But the science isn't in yet to really finally say whether this is good for us or not. So is there a rush? Why can't we wait for all these studies to be completed before we go ahead and put masts out there? Because they've already started in Limassol and Nicosia, haven't they?
There is not a particular rush, but we follow the roadmap of European Commission on that. And we are doing the right steps. As you have said, we already have the 2G, 3G and 4G technology. And this is not something new. It's the same idea, but in a very advanced level. And we are ready, we are preparing to introduce it in our society and in our economy. Regarding the concerns of the people about health risk, possible health risk, we are taking all the necessary measures. First of all, we are not pioneers on that. We are following the standards of WHO and of European Union. And we are very, very strict on that. At this moment, the providers of telephony communication are obliged to give their measurements about the radiation of their antennas, to provide the measurements for all mobile telephony antennas every 6 months to the authorities. And this, I think, it's maybe unique in the whole Europe.
But they're going to measure their own antennas. Do we not have somebody from outside that's not connected with them, or somebody from the ministry
Our
who could measure?
Our Department of Electronic Communications do that continuously. And they do it for the purposes of their work, but also if the citizens would like to have somebody to measure an antenna in their neighborhood, they can call us, they can call the department, and they respond and they go and they measure.
I have to interrupt you there, because the fact that you're doing that suggests that there is an acceptance that these antennae do have an impact on humans.
They have, if they exceed the levels, the right levels that are defined by
the ICAN.
Yeah.
IRP, and that brings us to another thing.
The European Union and the ICN IRP, yes.
But there are a lot of people who suggest, think back to the old tobacco debate and whether that caused cancer. There are people who do suggest that the ICN IRP is an NGO that has a lot of people who are connected to the industry, and that therefore means they might be setting the acceptable levels higher than they should be. And back again to all the science that's out there, particularly if you look on the internet, of well-known institutions and universities with professors saying this heats up body tissue, this potentially, they don't say for sure, can cause cancer, particularly in the brain. There are some very worrying things as well about pregnant women, children, men of reproductive age, as to the impact this can have.
I'm not a scientist to have my own opinion on that, but I trust that World Health Organization wouldn't do something to harm people's health. And also, I can tell you that we are not the first to introduce something. But we will follow the roadmap of European Union on that. And they are very, very advanced there regarding sciences and protection of human life. And when they are putting standards to protect human life, they know what they are doing. I'm sure about that.
There is no doubt, though, that the maximum radiation in our lives, which is already pretty high if you think of all the Wi-Fi hotspots and all the other things that are happening routinely these days, it's going to go up. And we don't actually know what impact that is going to have. There are even suggestions that it may be damaging to the environment and to other species. I don't think that's been studied either. And in these days when we have people talking about the importance of maintaining our biodiversity, I just wonder whether or not we're rushing headlong into something that, yes, it will help business undoubtedly, but will it be something that then we can't roll back?
I can say, as I told you, I'm not a scientist, and I can introduce you to our department to give you the right answers on technical matters. But the 5G, the fifth generation of cellular network technology, is still transmitting non-ionizing radio frequency emissions, as the existing mobile cellular networks is not going to be something different. But, of course, as I said, we have to keep it within the defined standards and levels, so that we don't cause any health problem.
And I'm not a scientist either, but I think I'm right in saying that the amount of data that will be transmitted with 5G is so great that we'll need much wider broadband, and that means we'll need many more antennas. Now, that also is going to be something just from an environmental point of view, because I have a feeling that in some areas they actually have to cut trees down so that the antennas can actually do what they're supposed to do because the trees get in the way. It's all these little things that I wonder if we've looked at holistically.
This is another matter that you're putting, and that concerns us and also other ministries, and we have a team between our appropriate departments to handle this problem, especially also the environmental side of it and how they look. I mean, you cannot have an ugly picture for the citizens because you need to have technology. We have to balance things, and we have to find a way to do it.
Okay, now let's go back to Cyprus. You've got, I think, a rollout coming up, or it's even started in Limassol for a pilot programme, and I think there are a couple of 5G antennas already in Old Nicosia?
I know that we have licensed the three main companies in Cyprus to have some pilot research on their 5Gs. And I've been recently in a presentation by SIDA that was very impressive. And
that was the one with the holograms and so on. Let me ask you, actually, what use are we going to put holograms to?
What use?
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, it's very impressive in a sort of stage show or whatever, but is it any use in terms of business and other communications?
These are for shows and entertainment, maybe, but I'm sure there are going to be uses for other ways. For business also, I can see that.
Okay, what else did they say when they did that presentation?
Well, it was very impressive. It wasn't so much in order to educate us, but to impress us, I think. And it was impressive about the potential of this new technology that is magnificent, actually, and has no limits. And I'm very glad that we can use it in more useful ways, like in the robotic medicine, in autonomous driving, in energy management, and in also creating smart cities.
Smarter cities is something we'll talk about maybe in the future, about smart buses, because I know that's under your remit and coming soon, hopefully, to Cyprus. But what would you say to people who are worried that we're moving too fast on this? I mean, if you look at the research, pro and con, you see that all the scientists admit that there needs to be more research. So are we opening Pandora's box before we know what's coming out?
Well, we are following European Union steps, and we are not the pioneers on that. So they are testing.
They've banned it in Brussels, haven't they?
No, not really. No.
I'm pretty sure I saw that in Brussels they had said that they won't have 5G.
I saw the information and I asked our department to confirm it, but they told me no. So, okay.
Okay, we'll follow that up. But I mean, it is worrying when you hear things like that, because it means that, you know, with the old saying, there's no smoke without fire.
Yes, because you have to be cautious, and you have to keep the measures that are appropriate to prevent any health effects. If you do that, you will be safe. But we are not doing it. We are not the first to do it. We will follow others. And we will do it when it is completely safe and when we have already taken all necessary measures.
That is our Minister for Communications and Transport, Vasiliki Anastasiadou, talking about the rollout of 5G technology in Cyprus. Well, we've just heard the Minister admitting that there are possibly some things we should consider before rolling out 5G, but she also said that we're not going to do it before anybody else, we're following rather than leading. You will also have heard her say several times that she's not a scientist. Well, nor am I. So we're now joined by Dr. Stella Kanamikhailidou, who is the President of the Cyprus Committee on Children's Environment and Health. They held a press conference recently at which the Health Minister said that he recognised that the results of research on electronic cloud and other negative environmental phenomena are no longer considered as hypotheses, but are rather scientific evidence demonstrating the harmful effects of the exposure of modern humans to an altered natural environment. Stella, you've done the research on this, particularly, I think, with regard to children's health, because they are, of course, more vulnerable than adults to this sort of radio frequency and so on. So what exactly are we afraid of?
First of all, I have to say that we did not do research in laboratories or whatever because we don't have the facilities, but we do the bibliography research. So we evaluate, as a scientific committee, this is actually our mandate, to evaluate all available scientific evidence of peer-reviewed studies, of independent studies, independent from the industry, because it matters for us a lot. Of course, we know and we consider also those, but emphasis is given on the peer-review independent studies and to evaluate all these issues and in relation in particular with children. I have spent my last 25 years of my career on children's environment and health issues. How toxic factors are affecting the health of the children. Because children are unique. They are not just a miniature of what we are as adults. They have a unique way of developing, a unique way of program developing. When we set children, we cover the issues from fetus up to adolescence. This is the whole spectrum. And because they are in a continuous growing situation, and because there is a specific program which has to follow exactly how the brain is developed is an issue related very much with this wireless radiation.
Let's go back a little bit. The electromagnetic fields and the radio frequencies that we already have with 2G, 3G, 4G, do we have any scientific evidence that those are affecting either pregnant women or young children? Because I've seen a lot of places where it says that schools, for example, particularly kindergartens and primary schools, shouldn't even have Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Why not?
You are absolutely right, because nowadays we have a lot of evidence on issues affecting children, and not only children, of course, but in particular children. So for children who are mostly worried about the development of the brain, the neurological development in general, which is the mostly affected. It could be affected by exposure.
This is the problem. People say it could be. Is there any evidence
we
that
have
it
a lot
is?
of studies. We have a lot of evidence. The evidence in relation, of course, science has never been a black and white. And as a scientist, I have to admit that still we have some open questions. But nowadays, the evidence that we have is very strong to be omitted and to be, let us say, make us waiting for the absolute evidence, making our children the experimental animals to prove this.
What I'm trying to get at is, with the evidence that we have, do we know how it affects the brain? Does it stop it developing? Does it stop the development of speech? What does it actually do?
It's changing the development, the normal development of the brain. It could be the case, and we have research also showing that when pregnant women are exposed to mobile phone, children have more risk to create autism, to create other neurological problems and delayed in their neurological development. And speaking about the evidence, how much evidence we have, let us give to you some figures very recently evaluated. In relation to neurological aspects, we are at the stage of 70 to 73 of absolute evidence. So we have some studies, 20%, 25% showing that there's no effect. But this is always in science, and particularly in medical science. We never have absolute cutoff that this is, and no study can show the opposite. The other issue, which is very, very important, because is our DNA, effects on DNA. And the previous understanding of the risk of this technology was that, in simple words, to be understandable, it is a non-ionizing radiation. So non-ionizing radiation can affect the DNA because cannot break the chemical bonds. So far is okay in relation to chemical bonds, cannot be break by this radiation, which has lower power. But this radiation is the only one, is the unique radiation that transfers information. And to do this transferring of information, it needs to be pulsed. It has pulses, and it has peak of intensities. So nowadays, it has been proved, and the degree of evidence comes up to 92%, that DNA is affected in various ways by this radiation. And
we're talking about 5G now, or 4G that we already have?
We speak about this radiation which covers all
Okay.
All. I would say that for 5G we don't have particular biological research to say what are the extras, if there are extra risks. And it seems to be the case, but we don't know exactly. And as a scientist, they have to speak on documents, okay? We have a lot of research on technological aspects of 5G, a vast research to develop this technology, but unfortunately we don't have biomedical research, which is the only one who can claim and show what are the particular effects. But whatever applies...
in scientific terms, we won't get that research until we have 5G, because you can't measure the effects.
No,
or can you do it in the laboratory?
Is not. Yes, you have to do in biological research in the laboratory, and this is the first step. Of course, we are not going to experiment on people. And in cases where this is implemented in some countries, then yes, by the time we got some epidemiological studies, although as a scientist I am very much concerned if and whether we can be able to have epidemiological studies, because to have epidemiological study you need to have unexposed population for comparison. And this, it will be very hard the case. So we might rely more and more on the animal studies and on the biological testing and toxicological testing. There are a lot of things that we can do in the meantime to
and
see.
I presume those things are being done. But
they are not. As in particular for 5G, we don't have those studies in hand. So we said, at least we have some studies. There are some 200 papers, I think, but no one is exactly on physiology, related to physiology of the humans, related to the biological aspects of humans. So we don't have, at the moment, enough information about this. But we know that 5G has also the properties, let us say, common properties to all 5 generations of electromagnetic field, because it's more or less the same, but it's different frequencies.
I was going to come to the frequencies, and also the fact that with the amount of data that can be transferred in 5G, you presumably have to have many more antennas everywhere in order to carry that data.
This is true. And coming to what our motto is as a committee. Our motto as a committee, based on all available data we have till the moment, is that we need to have reduction of the overall exposure to radiation.
Even the radiation we've already got?
Even from the radiation we already got, because this radiation level is too high. And there are ways to have this. And this is depend also on the very important issue, people to be informed. To be informed about the risks, to be informed about the ways they can minimize their exposure.
Tell us some of those ways.
Let us say, first of all, we can have some protective zones around hospitals and schools. We don't need to have Wi-Fi internet in schools. France already prohibits Wi-Fi in schools up to the 15 years old the class with 15 years old pupils.
So they use Ethernet instead? And
Ethernet is a safe way to get access to the internet and to use what we say safe technology. The other point is the rational use of mobile phones. Mobile phones should be used as a tool. It nowadays tends to be everything beyond the communication. There are many other things. But again, there were ways to minimize your exposure. For instance, if you have your smartphone and you're just making call, you deactivate Wi-Fi, you deactivate mobile data, you don't need those. And if you have activated and make the call and have the telephone next to your body, then the radiation is extremely high. But you don't need them. You don't need them when you photo or when you make video. You don't need them. And coming to the children, there is the issue of age-related introduction to the technology. I mean, it's very frustrating to see very small child, even 1 year, 2 years, having iPads in their hands, working with all those things and exposed to the radiation, beyond the fact that the American Pediatric Association says that up to 2 years old, no child should be exposed to screens because there are issues related to risk for their eyes because of the lights emitted from the screens. So we have screens and we have also the radiation, and all this affects the development of the child. The child needs a space. This is what neurobiologists, which we cooperate very closely, claim, because the child needs a space to develop properly his or her brain according to the pre-scheduled way. We don't have to intervene with making them doing things which are not for their age. And then they can have to be introduced with the technology gradually. Mainly, they said after 10 to 12 years they start to use the technology. We teach them how to use them safely. For instance, my granddaughter, which is 7 years now, she knows that when she wants to hear music from my telephone or see my photos in my telephone, she said, yeah, we put on flight mode. I never give to a child a mobile phone which is not on flight mode, which has not deactivated Wi-Fi and 4G. The other thing is the distance from the device. So use handset, and the pregnant women should always use a stable phone, a landline phone. But even if she's using a mobile phone, she has to use in a way I explained before.
And presumably keep it away from their stomach.
Away from their belly. And the other thing I would not like to see the people doing, women doing, mothers doing, is to feed their child, breastfeed their child, holding a tablet, a wireless tablet next to them so that she spends the time. This time they are exposing the child. They did for their child the best by giving the breast milk, which is excellent, which is a gift for them.
And then
but
they're
on the other
irradiating
hand,
them.
They irradiate them in a very crucial period of their development. So all these things is rational use. And I give you another example, if you allow me, because of the new Internet of Things, as we tell. And of course, we are not against technology. Technology can help us in many ways, especially in the research, in the operations, in many, many things. And we have to get the benefits. But please tell me, is it a benefit for me as a woman to know via my telephone whether or not the milk in my refrigerator is expired or how much juice I have there? And this, of course, is at the expense of high exposure in all the home. Exposure children, exposure myself, exposure everything.
Very quickly, let me ask you about apps. Okay, because you talk about the Internet of Things, and very soon we're going to, I suppose, be able, if we wanted to do exactly what you said and say, I'm in the car coming home, I'll switch on the dishwasher, I'll switch on I'll switch on the other, the air conditioning. But apps actually, don't they create more radiation from your phone?
Of course, this is what worries us. And that's why we think it's very, very important to inform the people, to make proper choices, to balance benefit and risk. And one example which is very frustrating, I saw in the internet, I don't remember in which country, they have Pampers with a device on the pamper so that the mother is will have a signal on her phone that she needs to change his child. But I think, based on the Convention of the Right of the Child for Health, this is unacceptable.
Well, you're obviously very, very
unacceptable,
riled up about this, and a lot of people really don't know what they should be
That's
thinking.
why we
I'll
advise
ask you.
people to visit our website. It's very easy. It's pedi, it's www.pedi, the Greek word, .com.cy.
That's presumably PAIDI.
Yes, and they could find a lot of information. They could find the guides, simple guides, so they start to think. And we think, for instance, in the hospitals, we have recently a very nice project in Makarios Hospital. We initiated a project there, and we proved that when we deactivate Wi-Fi in the intensive care units, we find out that the exposure of the children is much below the biologically safety limits. So the children can heal up in a nice environment which does not affect their immune system, because we have also potential affection of the immune system.
We haven't time to go into whether or not it actually helps the children in the hospital to heal better, but I do take one thing away from this chat with Dr. Stella Ganna Michailidou, and that is, do you really think that you're so lazy that you need to rely on your mobile phone to do things that we've all done for years, especially if it's making a healthier environment, particularly for our children? Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.